Hey guys, how you doing? One thing I wanted to talk about was edge thickness and edge sharpness. Now, obviously, everybody knows what edge sharpness is. It's the sharpness of the blade, to cut through certain material, whatever it may be, whether it's leather, whether it's flesh, whether it's food, whether it's wood. Edge thickness is going to be this edge right here. As you can see right here, this one's subdued, so it's a lot easier to see. What I'm calling edge thickness is basically right before the secondary bevel. Okay, you can see in front of you I have two Master Chiefs and then I have one Huntsman. These are production knives of mine. They're available on the website. What I'm going to attempt to go over and to explain to you is the way that I do my edge thickness, and I do have a sweet spot and what I try to strive for. That's why you see the caliber right there. When I usually make knives, and when a lot of knife makers make knives, they usually try to bring down the edge thickness to about 0 or close to. And what I have found that is, being that this is the internet and YouTube, first thing somebody does when they go get a nice brand new production knife is they go out into the woods and they want to test it out. That's great, that's fine. But what I need to tell you is that not all knives are made to go on baton wood. That's why I highly suggest you don't do it unless you're in an emergency situation. Think of a sushi knife, think of a fillet knife. They're extremely thin because they're made to cut very, very thin fish, okay, or rubbery fish or soft fish. You want a nice thin blade with a very sharp edge. Now, you wouldn't necessarily take a fillet knife and go out into the woods and baton wood with it, because you probably wind up bending it or breaking it or something like that. And on the opposite side, you wouldn't necessarily use an axe to cut up sushi. Okay, so what I try to do as a knife maker is I try to find a balance in between the two. It's not always easy. The knives that you see right here, the Master Chiefs, they are primarily field knives, okay, or trail knives or camp knives, which means they will be made a little bit thicker, because if somebody wanted to create kindling with it or beat it up, they'll be made a little bit thicker on the edge, which makes for not a great slicing knife. Although they will come sharp, it's up to you to decide how sharp you want it to be. Okay. On this side right here, this is the Huntsman. It's a hunting knife. Okay. And on this knife, what I do is I try to grind it as thin as possible. Now, it is a hollow grind, so it is a little bit different than the flat grind. But with the hollow grind, what I try to do is hollow out as much as possible to make it a great cutter. Okay, it's primarily a cutting knife to get into the flesh and get into the animal and make all the cuts and process the animal. That's the idea behind the Huntsman. So there's two different trains of thought. One's a camp knife for overall utility, and one's a hunting knife for cutting. All right. So that being said, I don't want to get very controversial, but some people, think, well, I should be able to take a knife into the woods and do whatever I want with it. I should be able to baton wood and do all this stuff. Yes, you can, but here's my school of thought on this. And any survival expert will, anybody that's in the know will let you understand this. If you take just one tool into the woods and it's a knife, it is your job, if you want to survive for a very long time, excuse me, to take that knife and preserve it as long as possible. So preserve the edge, preserve it for use it as long as you possibly can to help prolong your life and to make your life as comfortable as possible. So if that knife right there is the only one that you're using to cut up your animals, if it's to make traps, if it's to make shelters, if it's to do surgery, if you need to cut something out of your body, if it's to protect yourself against a bear or an animal that's trying to kill you, then that would be my last option to make kindling. There's no real need to, if you've been in a forest, especially in the Northeast, you can find twigs and small twigs to make kindling with. Now, this being YouTube, what do we find as tests? Okay, it's not very scientific, but we do the paper cut test. All right, we do the cardboard cut test. We do the batoning of the wood. Maybe a couple rope tests, but that's pretty much it. Or the bottled water cutting test. All right. it's just all entertainment as far as I'm concerned. If you really want to do a test, they do have a test center. I think it's you could send your knife off, and it's like all scientific, where they do like 1,000 cuts. They put your knife inside a machine, and it accurately depicts how many times it cuts the rope or the material. All right, that's scientific. But again, this being YouTube and the internet, it's going to be down and dirty. It's going to be quick. My point being is, if you have to use the knife in an emergency situation to cut up large pieces of material and it's going to save your life, then go for it. If, in my train of thought, the way I think of it is to preserve your knife as long as possible until you get rescued. Okay, that's all I'm going to say about that. For testing purposes, if you are a reviewer, and I've had plenty of people do reviews, and they baton wood and went through knots and cut paper and cardboard and all that other good stuff. That's great. I have no problem with that. But what we're talking about is the edge thickness, and I want to show you a little bit of how I do it, and maybe this will help you with a little bit of information. Okay. All right. So I got my calipers. All right, and again, these knives are not completely done. As you can see, there's no handles on it. I will need to be doing some refining, but all right, make sure it's zeroed out. Millimeters, if the batteries work. Oh, on, there you go. All right, so you can see. All right, the first Master Chief is basically, it's about 3/16 inch thick, or almost 5 mils. You can see that right there. All right, 5 mils. And what I'm going to attempt to measure is this piece right here. You can see there's just two bevels. There's a secondary bevel, and this is a flat grind. Okay, so I'm going from 5 mils down to 1.7. Okay, it's pretty thick. I mean, very, very thick. It's not going to be a good paper cutter. Let's see if I can grab some paper. All right, even with that edge, it's good, but it's more like tearing because it's a very thick knife. All right, so it's not that good. On the cardboard side, all right, it cuts, but it's a little bit rough. All right, so what I'll probably do with this knife is I'll refine it, but as you can see, it does cut cardboard very well. More of a chopper than, or actually, I should say, this is going to be fine if you want a baton with it because it's very thick. All right, get all this garbage out of the way. The next one, as you can see, it's almost 5 mils thick. All right, this edge is a little bit more refined. All right, let's see if you can see that. It's 1.40. Okay, so if I take my paper cut test, and I probably have to sharpen some of these. Alright, so it's cutting a little bit better, as you can see right there. Alright, it's not going to be feather thin, but, I probably have some dull spots here and there. So it's cutting, and I probably have to put a little bit better edge on there, but as you can see, I got my cardboard. Okay, cardboard cuts fine. Alright, now cardboard's about the thickness of any type of animal, if you will, but as you can see, it's cutting fine. Not razor thin, but when it comes to a little bit thicker skin, it'll cut fine. The next knife is the Huntsman. As you can see right here, this is 1/4 of an inch thick. It's 6 mils. All right, you can see that. The edge on this is hollow grind, as you can see. All right. It's a little bit thinner. It's like 1 point. Let's see if I can get it in the light. There you go. All right, 1.2. And on this edge, because it's hollow ground, it's probably going to be a little bit better in cutting, as you can see right there. No problems, right? Like I said, it's made primarily for cutting. And I'm not really good at this, but you can see. No problems cutting. Alright, so you can see, like, even with a 1/4 inch thick knife, the thinner you get this edge profile, the better cutter it's going to be. But the more brittle or thinner this edge is going to be. Okay, as far as cardboard goes, all right, no problem. All right, so that's pretty much it, guys. I mean, I don't want to bore you to death. I know there's a lot better guys out there that can explain this a little bit better. What I try to do is get into the 1.3 mils is basically where I want to be on my edge. So I want to be on my edge here, 1.3 mils. This will be refined. These two will be refined just a little bit more before I send it out, and then I'm going to change the edge a little bit as well. There's also a lot of other factors that go in there as far as edge geometry, but I'm not going to get into that. I just want to keep it down in 30. If you do get a knife from me and you want it to be razor thin, please send me an email, let me know, and I will bring it down to whatever level that you need it to be. However, if you do take it out into the woods and baton wood, you might have you might snap the blade or take a chunk out of it. It has happened. I've seen it, and it's happened to me, which is why I tend to leave it. So there's that line between ultra thin sharpness and the toughness where you can baton through woods. And there's another thing too, is that all woods are not the same. There's hardwood, softwoods. Okay, so batoning through a piece of pine is not going to be the same as going through a piece of oak. So you got to keep that in mind. Most of the blades that I make, you can baton with it, but I highly suggest you don't, just because you spend $250 on a knife and then you're going to snap it off. In an emergency situation, if you have to, you got to do what you got to do, but I highly suggest you don't do it unless you need to or unless you're testing. All the blade thickness I said, all these blades right here will be available on the website itself. Just go up to 3riverblades.com. Thanks.